while we're getting ready, if you're interested.
We're going to be checking.
Maybe everybody wins. But anyway, if you. The paper. Okay.
Oh, no.
You have a standing.
I want him to take my spot on the panel.
They're always in this court. Yeah, no, we only do it if we can. So. Well, let's start. Oh, no, you're late. So I did my.
Hi, everybody. Chandra. Fighting enablement.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to use the microphone. Okay, so we have a one question Menti. If you would do me a favor and use your phone, it's probably the fastest way to do it. And this is really around business architecture knowledge base. And the definition on the left-hand side is from Wendy Kuhn, and it's part of the BizBach, from the Business Architecture Guild. So a business architecture knowledge base is really where you put all of the information that you gather when you're doing business architecture. And the key is that you can connect it all together. And so I was curious to find out what people are doing in this space. So, and I allowed for kind of a multi-select. So, so it looks like we have some homegrown, which is what I expected. And you don't have a formal knowledge, architecture knowledge base. I was not surprised about that. Good to hear some people are using LeanIX and some people are using LeanIX and Signavio. So this whole presentation came about, Wendy Kuhn did a master class at our headquarters. I think it was it will be 2 years, I think in March. And it's available online. If anybody's interested, I could share the link to it, but she has a certification, that little certification that it comes with, and it's free. And so she did this all-day masterclass on business architecture, and in the middle of it, we had somebody speak about Signavio and LeanIX, but they didn't fully connect with the business architecture content that she had presented because that person had never seen all that. Well, I had run into Wendy Kuhn. I was doing a master's degree at Penn State in enterprise architecture, and she was a guest professor. And so I ran into her a number of years ago, and I've sort of been following her. And does everybody know who she is, Wendy Kuhn? Yes? So this book, I think is, to me, I literally travel with it. I brought it here with me. You'll see in my presentation, I have a lot of her content that I use with attribution, because I think that she really explains business architecture in a way that people can understand it. So when she did that master class, the whole day, because it was like six hours of content, she talked about this business architecture knowledge base. Now, she doesn't talk about tools. She never does. And, that's fine. And she was a friend of SAP. She doesn't work for SAP or anything, but she never mentioned a single tool. And I thought, well, wait a minute, everything she's talking about, we have tools that do this. And so I wanted to kind of show that. So that's where this presentation started from. And I'm going to call it, like, how pharmaceuticals, like you have an off-label use. So, it works for one thing, but they figure out it works for something else. Like, I guess the the weight loss drugs help people not drink alcohol, apparently. Alcohol industry is not too happy about that, but that's an off-label use of the GLP-1s or whatever they're called. Anyway, so this is kind of an off-label use of our tools as a business architecture knowledge base. Heartbeat. Okay.
Do that again.
That's awkward. Will you hold me to 35 minutes? Hold me to 35 minutes. Okay, thanks. So it's all really about, strategy to execution. You guys are at a business architecture a business architecture conference, so I'm sure you know this, but this is just a simple view of that, just to make sure that we're grounded. And I have a couple of slides around really, okay, so this is our Signavio is our business process management software, and then LeanIX is our enterprise architecture tool. So like I said, I figured out that these two tools work together to serve as this business architecture knowledge base. And essentially, this presentation is my proof of how that could work. I wanted to start with a couple of definitions because I presented this to a number of different groups, and not everybody is as knowledgeable about business architecture as you guys probably are. So if this is old news for you, forgive me, but I just want to get us all on the same page. And again, you'll see at the top corner, that's Wendy's her website, and she says you're allowed to use her content as long as you attribute it to her. So I think the way she shows things is really great. So to start with, so we have value streams. So that's kind of our, the end-to-end view. I came from a wholesale distribution customer before I was at SAP. It was alcohol. That's why I know the alcohol business is way down because of the GLP-1s. But our most important process was order to cash. So that's what we talked about. And then, the major steps in that and anything that has to do with that was the most important thing within the company. So that's a value stream. Business capabilities, I feel like we've talked about this a lot. It's really what the organization does, not how or why, but what. And one thing I had found recently, somebody was talking about how business capabilities are a great way to describe an organization because they don't really change. Like organizations reorganize. Like here at SAP, we reorganize every year. Got an email yesterday, whole organization's changed that I work for. Great. Okay, but what we do hasn't changed. And if we do have a business capability model, that probably hasn't changed. But the leaders change, the way the organization's structured, and maybe even the processes are changing, but the business capabilities are probably pretty consistent. So this is just a way of showing that. And then she talks about, in the way that we organize, capabilities can be reused within different components or segments of a value stream. So you can see, like the green items, it might be something that is reused across different processes, different value streams. So the capability is one, but it can be reused. So then we start to see those together and how do they connect together? So that's what I'm talking about. So you can have those enabling capabilities that are reused across different value streams and ultimately different processes. And then when we put those together, and this is really my background, I've done enterprise architecture for like 14 years now, but I did a lot of program and project management because I enjoyed it so much. I would sign up to do things like that. So when I was running projects, if you start to look at what capabilities are being impacted by a specific project or initiative or program, that's how you want to organize the work, right? Because sometimes you realize that there's multiple projects that are affecting the same capability. And that's a problem, right? Because if ultimately a capability is a people, process, and technology, and if you think about implementing something that changes somebody's process or the technology that they're using, and you change it 2, 3, 4 times in 1 year, that's not going to work out too well. So I really like this ability to kind of look at those capabilities and figure out where there might be some overlaps. And maybe you could organize those all together into one initiative. Maybe it does hit at different objectives, but the capabilities, if you organize it that way, it's going to be a more effective change. So that's the idea. But if you don't have the visibility to that, then you can't make that connection. And that's where this business architecture knowledge base comes together. And then we think about all of the other pieces. So as an enterprise architect, technology-focused person, I tend to think about these things in the gray. those areas, that are, applications, data integrations, all those kind of things. Those are really what live in LeanIX, and that's really been my world for the most part with enterprise architecture. But then the green things are things that are more typically considered to be part of business architecture. Now, business process is something some people consider it to be part of business architecture, some people don't. What do you guys think? Do you consider business process to be under the domain of business architecture? No? No. Anybody think it does? I mean, it's just how your organization sees it. It doesn't really matter. It's curious. Do you have like a business process excellence team or anything like that? Like who owns process? Continuous improvement team. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have credibility because they're in the team, right? Versus another team kind of trying to tell them what to do in a sense. So yeah, that's a good way to organize it. I worked at a global staffing company a few companies back, and they had a very strong and robust business process practice. And they had a global process excellence team, and they were joined at the hip with the enterprise architecture team, but it was a separate group. So I always thought that was a good way, to organize it. So then if we bring it all together, so then we start to, we look at the top and we say, we start and look at it from those value stream perspective. And like I gave my example of order to cash, so that if you look at it from the top level end-to-end process, then that allows you to kind of know what are the capabilities that you want to focus on. Because a capability model could have hundreds and hundreds of capabilities. And if you start to think about, you can't focus on hundreds and hundreds of things, right? So you need to be able to kind of filter it down. So if you look at it from the value stream perspective, and then you see the capabilities that support each of those value stream segments, then you can group, let's say, so I have an example of, I was running an e-commerce program when I first learned about business architecture, when I ran into Wendy Kuhn. And it was the first e-commerce system in the history of this company. And we needed product information management, like a PIM system. We needed API management. We needed somebody to manage all those products. So that company had 50,000 products, all kinds of alcohol bottles, different sizes, minis all the way up to the big ones, the jug handle. And so we needed pictures, we needed tasting notes, we needed all that stuff for 50,000 products. So that was a capability that we didn't have in that company before, because in the past, the sales reps would go and talk to the liquor store owners and describe, and maybe they would have some PDFs or something they would show, but the customers had no way to look up that information except to Google it from the supplier's site. So anyway, so we had to create a capability for that. And through the process of learning about business architecture, I realized that, wait, we don't have that in the company. We need that. So we ended up, I ended up working with the owners of the company, and we ended up building up a whole department for that. It was 17 positions that we got as a result of that work. And that really came from understanding the fact that it was a totally new capability. So if you look at, I don't know, use the green initiative as an example. So we realized there were some capabilities that we needed to add. There were some that we had to improve. If you group those together, then those are the initiatives. And then the capability is really what brings it all together. It's kind of the linchpin, the way I see it. So what I did was I took that model, and again, that's Wendy's graphic that I just kind of changed for my use. Now what I did was I color-coded Signavio and LeanIX. So yellow is Signavio and blue is LeanIX. And so I basically took all those pieces and said, okay, where do these live today? And so anyway, that's what I'm going to show you. What's my time? Okay. So if we kind of look at it from the perspective of how does this all fit together? So if there's a change in the organization or a new strategy that's coming through, and then we know what value stream is that going to impact. And then we figure out what capabilities. So is it either something new or something we need to change? And then we connect that into the strategic objectives that we're trying to accomplish from that project. And then the impact to the business process and applications, then that's really where this business architecture knowledge base comes in. It's really in the connectivity that the power is there. Like I used to have spreadsheets and SharePoint lists and Visio diagrams and all these kind of things, and all this information was all over the place. But as a developer or a project manager, an enterprise architect even, I didn't necessarily understand maybe work that I was working on a project, like what value stream it impacted or what process. So this really allows you to kind of see that connectivity. So Signavio, like I said, it's our business process excellence tool. It does a lot of different things. Jose's going to talk a little bit more when we get to his section, but I'm using it as an off-label use. So I'm basically saying these are a very narrow look at this tool of how it would support a business architecture knowledge base. It does a lot more than that. This is like a very small amount, but you can put in metrics. You can obviously process is really what it does. You can put policies, standards, all of that, and then obviously the value streams. And then LeanIX is our enterprise architecture tool. It covers a lot of the business architecture. I think, I highlighted them in yellow. So these are the elements that are in LeanIX out of the box that support business architecture. So you start at the very top and you start with strategic objectives, initiatives or projects and programs. Then we think about organizations like your business units or even down to individual departments. Business capability is in the middle, and that's intentional because it's really the linchpin and sort of the heart of the system, along with applications. So those two together are really where everything is built up on top. Question? Are you talking about like data objects, things like that, or? So I think we are calling those data objects and data and then some within LeanIX, it's easy to extend the meta model. So this is what we call the meta model. So you can have even down a further level of detail like a data object attribute. So you can have in further detail. And actually SAP internally uses LeanIX and we've made that extension. So, yep. And then obviously interfaces are obvious. The business context is a little bit confusing in that you might not know what that is, but that's actually can be the business process, and that can go in through an out of the box integration between LeanIX and Signavio. And that's what this diagram is. This just shows the integrations out of the box, but you can customize it. You don't have to use it this way, but by default, the applications, capabilities, and organizations go into Signavio from LeanIX, and then the processes are viewable. You'll see that the integration between LeanIX and Signavio is bidirectional. So if you're documenting a process and you associate an application with it, it goes back to LeanIX and makes that connection so that you have that relationship. The processes are purely authored in Signavio, and so that's why it's a one-way integration. Now, I took my diagram just to remind you. So we said the yellow is Signavio. Now I'm going to go through this really fast, and I'll provide this. I've actually trimmed back some slides, but there's a lot here. I just wanted to kind of click through these a little bit just to show you what it looks like. I'm just going to show you all the pieces. So that's the, oops, sorry. So this is the main page that you typically come into the Process Explorer within Signavio, and there's strategic objectives, but also lots of best practice content that's available right there. And then the strategic objectives can either be in Signavio or LeanIX, and they can be integrated. It can also be connected to metrics and goals. And really, it really is a process excellence tool. That is the point of the tool. So you can see, we can start to see the NDM processes. I actually put up some printouts on the back wall after this. If you're interested, you might want to take a look at that. We could talk through that a little bit of the reference content that we have available, and that's through Signavio. And then you can see as we start to drill down, then we start to see the value streams, and we can decompose, you know, from the end to end down to individual processes. And this is just an example of a BPMN. And again, the top level information can be sent over to LeanIX, so all that connectivity can be made. And then this is just an example. We have journey, customer and employee journeys that can be captured. And Signavio does a lot with metrics and benchmarking and all of that. And so I just wanted to show an example of a journey dashboard that we have. So that really quick, that was a very, very quick overview of Signavio, again, only kind of using it as this business architecture knowledge base. It does a lot of other things, but this is a way that you can start to create that connectivity. So now I'm going to go hop over to the LeanIX world, and just to remind you back of, these are the main sets of fact sheets that we're going to use. You could use other ones as well, but just again in this narrow view of what we need. So this is a little bit, it's a lot to look at. This is what we call the inventory view within LeanIX. And on the left, you'll see the names of all the fact sheets, and it matches up with that meta model. So I just kind of wanted to kind of draw that connection so you can tie back to what I had showed you with the meta model. So just giving you some examples. So we have business context. So this is where, and I like to call these process cards. I call them process cards because the process itself is in Signavio, but it's like a description of it. And you never would change it in LeanIX. You're only going to change it in Signavio. So this is the description of a process. And then you could start to see that the big thing about LeanIX is the relationships that you can make, the connections. And there's something called the Relation Explorer, and you can connect, you know, pretty much everything to everything. Out of the box, there's certain relationships that are established, and you can modify that if you need to. But an example of a business process or context that you might want to connect with would be, say, an application. So, and I know this sounds silly, but I was a ERP developer for a long time. And sometimes I would be making changes or working on projects, and I really didn't fully understand the process that the change that I was making supported or could impact it, and certainly made changes that probably had unintended consequences. And this allows you to have that visibility, both from the IT perspective, but also the business perspective as well. And then you can see that within LeanIX, you can view that BPMN as well. So as a developer, as a, you know, whatever role within the IT space is typically using LeanIX, I can see, again, how this application is supporting the process and what that process flow is without having to go look for it somewhere else. So then if we think about strategic objectives, so, you know, what are the strategic objectives that we're trying to accomplish? A lot of times in my experience, the strategic objectives were well thought out, but not well understood of what it takes to make it happen. Like when I did my e-commerce project, they had no idea what it would take to make this effective, and all the different pieces and the things that needed to come together to make that happen. They just knew they wanted to have a website and customers could place orders and get their liquor delivered, not licensed customers. And this transparency allows you to tie it all together so that you can show what's really needed to make these strategic objectives successful. So we can break them into subcomponents. You know, in my case, it was, you know, e-commerce, and then we had a bunch of different pieces as they came together. And you can break it down. You can connect those strategic objectives to organizations, so your business units, departments, regions, what have you. And then you can start to connect them to business capabilities. So the example that I gave you, you know, we needed something brand new. We didn't have this capability in-house, so we had to build the people, process, and technology to support it. So that's a business capability view. Now, an example actually from within SAP, the gentleman that runs the enterprise architecture team told me a story about the first year that they really activated LeanIX and looked at initiatives by capabilities. As he told me, they had 10 projects that year, 10 initiatives, and 7 of the 10 were impacting the same capability, which is a hot mess. Because if you're in that department, it's like every other month, it's like, okay, this is going to change. Nope, it's going to change again. It's going to change again. And so by having that transparency, they were able to organize the initiatives in a more effective way. So we talked about this yesterday. This is just an example of the business capability where we talked about the current maturity and the target maturity, and also the strategic importance. And that's where you can kind of get that commodity differentiation or innovation that's kind of in the middle of the screen. That's just an example. So like you might have a capability, but it needs to be better to support a strategic initiative. So that's where you would, you know, have a target maturity that would be higher than the one you have today. And then, I mean, in my world, from an enterprise architecture perspective, we like to think about applications. So that's kind of at the crux of all of this. But you can connect those to the business capabilities, to the strategic objectives, to the initiatives, so that you have an understanding of how it all fits together. And then this just talks about how you can kind of have different details on the applications here. And then we talked about data objects or object attributes you can also add in here. And you can extend it very easily. Like if there were some additional fields that you wanted to capture, I mean, you could easily extend the model for that. And then from a technology perspective, we do look at interfaces a lot, like where the data is flowing between different applications, and you can document them in there. Uh-huh. Mhm. Right. There is. Yeah, that's a great question. So, and the gentleman sitting across from me might have a better answer, but I'm going to say that there's like a health score that's built in, and you can update it and decide like what metrics you want to determine for health. I know for me personally, doing interfaces is a iterative process. It's like you gather, you think you have everything. And then this just happened with a customer I was working with. They thought they had everything documented, and they moved a bunch of stuff, and then something broke because they had an interface that they didn't realize they had. So it's always getting better. But to your point, the visibility, the understanding, and transparency is only as good as the data. So there's a lot of ways to get data in, and we're adding to it every day. In fact, I think there's an auto discovery for BTP integrations is it in production? I don't know. It's coming soon. I believe it's coming this quarter. Yeah, so that's one of the big things we've been doing, is trying to auto discover more and more things. Yeah, but to your point, there's always more to gather and validate, right? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think that's a team question that you should ask yourselves. But I mean, I always ask people, I look at enterprise architecture and really business architecture as the same. It's that, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So every project that you do from the time you start, you get all of that. And then you have all of that, and then the next project you do all of that, and there's some overlap, and then the next project you do all of that, and now you have like those three piece. I mean, that's how I did it. I started a practice from scratch. I had nothing, like nothing at all documented.
Qualitative. I also recommend you every tool, and if you quality seals unknown
Right.
some combination process. Oh,
Yeah.
model makes effective that falls apart.
Right. And I look at it from the project perspective, because that's when all the testing happens. That's when the go live and the tickets come and all that stuff. So that's when you've got it all. Like the customer that I had that forgot something, now they have it all because that's all connected. You know what I mean? And it's all in LeanIX, and then slowly, slowly. Uh-huh. Mm. And yeah, and you can use surveys and yeah, and you said once a year. I was going to say every 6 months, but whatever makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends on how broad people's responsibilities are, I would say, but. Yeah, and sorry, I just wanted to get us onto the next topic, but thank you for sharing that. I was going to say, in my own experience, one of the big things is to tie when changes happen. So I used to run the change advisory board before production changes went in, and I made everybody update the architecture repository when anything new or changed was done. So that kind of got the day to day, and then we did we did biannual, but updates. So between the big update and the little incremental updates, that seemed to capture it. And we wouldn't let the things go into production unless they were documented. So.
I think I want to guess thread is going to be data. The quantity is not governance is really like Chandra saying. Help you, right? Never going to be hungry. My recommendation, in my experience, is I am that and make that enforces maintenance of.
Yeah, and I had a debate with my manager at the time. I was trying to be nice and still let things go into production without the changes, and then tell people they could catch it up in the next week or whatever. And then eventually I said, okay, you were right. It has to be a hard stop. So we forced it. We just forced it. And then once we did that, then everything was updated, and you knew what the system was, what the landscape was. So I went through all the pieces, all the little green checks are everything I've showed you. So I think hopefully you see that these two tools working together can serve as this business architecture knowledge base. They do a lot of other things, which is what Jose's going to talk about.
So you finished earlier. Yeah.
That's a first.
So, thank you. So I'm going to be talking to you about something, zooming out from where Chandra is living, right? So she talked about business architecture. I'm going to take you to what do we do in SAP with these tools to support you during the business transformation process, okay? It's going to be a short explanation and presentation because Anubhav is going to come back later on and basically help us to understand how the tooling, the methodology, and the reference content are critical elements of the SAP architecture, reference architecture, right? So basically, I'm going to take you through this journey. In SAP, we bring basically the dimensions of that make basically transformation or business transformation projects successful, right? And we do it in a consolidated and streamlined approach. We primarily focus on the people, the processes, application, and data, taking you from the strategy to the execution. We understand that tools are really important here, right? So we need to make sure that there's connectivity between the people, the processes, applications, so we can actually bring meaningful insights into the power of change, okay? But it's not only about the tooling, okay? It's also about the methodology that is going to give you guidance step by step. Is going to be the reference architecture or the accelerators that are going to help you. It's going to be the business AI, the integration. All these are basically the elements that make this all possible, right? So with all these elements, we're going to be able to bring you from fast time to insight when organizations are basically working on their strategy, but also we're going to be able to take you fast time to adapt when you're executing it. Okay. And please stop me if you got any questions. I'm happy to answer that. So in this holistic view, we created this holistic view because we understand that organizations struggle during the transformation process, right? So we identify all the ingredients necessary in each of these classifications, and we put them in the project life cycle to understand what are the key elements in the transformation process, okay? SAP brings three of the market leaders into this classification. One is, as Chandra mentioned, LeanIX with the enterprise architecture. We bring Signavio for process mining, process insights, and process management. We also bring SAP WalkMe that helps you with the adoption of the digital platforms, right? So we cover the full stack. We cover the full stack from strategy to the IT components. So we make sure that we all got you covered from the very top to the bottom, right? And where we don't have solutions here, we also tap on our ecosystem of partners that can help us to basically complete the picture, right? In this case, I can talk to you about some of them, like Tricentis, that help us with the test automation, or we got Cinetti with the data management as well, okay? So taking to the next level down, if we look at the solutions, we can see in this diagram how those solutions are showing up, right? Some of them are SAP-led, some of them are purely consulting-led, and then some of the ones are basically partners. But we make sure that we got you covered through in this transformation process. I'm not going to try to cover all these ones here. I'm going to basically focus on the three ones that I just mentioned, which is basically SAP LeanIX, SAP Signavio, and WalkMe as well. So those are the three elements that cover the people, the processes, and the application dimensions, okay? So if we look at how these applications support a business transformation project, the first question you need to ask yourself is, what is our plan? What is our strategy, right? So you need to define what are we trying to do? Are we doing a ERP transformation? Are we changing the business model? Are we reacting to the market conditions? So once we clarify that and we get the buy-in from the organization, then we can start asking the real questions in phase one, which is basically how my organization is doing. So if we look at the tools here, we look at in the top, Signavio will help you with the process analysis and mining, right? And then we got LeanIX is going to help you to basically model your capabilities and help you with the ASIS structure or ASIS architecture in your applications. And then we got WalkMe that is going to help you with your usage analysis or your stack, right? Then the next question is going to be, where do we want to be? How do we want the organization to look like? And then again, the tools will help you to basically do, in this case, Signavio, to process design and collaboration and governance. And then we got LeanIX to help you with you define your target architecture and define roadmap planning as well. And then WalkMe with the KPI settings and some of the workflow benchmarks as well. So while you go through this process, the tools will help you to go through a smooth implementation, right? And get you into the actual operations as well once you perform your go live, et cetera, right? So these are the key activities that these applications will support you during the transformation process, okay? So again, we have three major tools as part of the integrated tool chain. We have many more. We are talking about the core ones here. So we can see that in this case, WalkMe is going to help you to the governance and automation process, right? Signavio is going to help you with the process insights, process management, and LeanIX will help you with your enterprise architecture by basically documenting your landscapes. And that's pretty much all what I got here. It's a short presentation, as I told, and Anubhav is going to take you through the journey of understanding how these tools and the methodology and the reference content made by SAP are key elements of the SAP architecture framework. Okay? Any questions?
I have two different answers. So
Well, you have to model it, right? So you have to basically bring the data within. So are you referring to basically?
Like LeanIX, for example, right? If I've got my value streams there, I've got my capabilities, I've got all the connections, right? And as a business architect, I can see that. Enterprise architects, but my typical user, you know, maybe it's a reader that, you know, see, hey, I've got this initiative and how the initiative impacts the value stream.
So we try to answer that
Okay.
first. So LeanIX is a data-driven. So the key element of all that is that you make all the relation actions. So whenever you're gonna go and start, I call it, when you start from the very, you're gonna be initiatives or projects or and then you're gonna start making the relationship with all else around. With all that relationship being, call it the business book diagrams, allow you to basically drill down from the very top to the bottom, right? Make the component. So you can actually literally drill them one by one and see the child relationship and across all these elements. So the diagramming and the reporting is so limited. Once established.
So you can create dashboards, so which a lot of customers that I run into, they have dashboards that are created for business. No, actually, it's built. Well, I was going to give you two ideas. So one is having a dashboard within LeanIX because the licensing is not by user, it's by application. So therefore, I mean, I've met customers that have thousands of users that are logging into LeanIX, and you can create different dashboards for those folks. That's one example.
Can take you to any level you want. Once you got the data there, you can flash it and just.
Yeah, and so I'm going to give you a chance in a second. So yeah, so yeah, and I'm doing that with my customer as well. So as SAP architects, we use our tool, and we give view-only access. Also, what she mentioned was the Power BI thing, and that's something that apparently I think is very easy. I personally haven't done it, but from what I understand, it's very easy to set up. A lot of customers do that as well. So they create dashboards and or metrics and charts and things like that, pulling that data out. So I've seen it, you know, all those ways. Also, I wanted to mention one other thing. I don't know, does anyone ever go through is this the right version of the PowerPoint game by looking at like file dates and whatnot? Did you ever do that? I can't tell you how many times I've done that at SAP. I'm going to work, talk to a customer, and I want to know like what their current state architecture is so that I don't look like an idiot when I start asking them questions about something they changed 2 years ago. And I go and I look at all the file dates of the PowerPoints. And when I was at a customer, we had the same issue because you're trying to make decisions, but you're not sure what the right version is. Anyway, I had a customer that uses LeanIX, and he was sitting next to me at the dinner one time, and he showed me, he said, I disallowed PowerPoint on my team. And I was like, oh, what do you mean? He's like, and he pulls up LeanIX on his cell phone, sitting at the dinner, sitting next to me, and he said, look, this is our architecture. And I know, and it's always up to date. And I was like, well, okay. And so I thought that was, I mean, because I personally have played that game so many times, and even sometimes I lose, right? Somebody copied a new version of an old PowerPoint, and then I use the wrong one because I'm using basically file dates as my way. So that's a way to do it. But yeah, that's why I've seen all those things in action. Oh, and Jason, I promised I'd give you a. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, and we kind of skipped over the thing, but the premise behind LeanIX is this data sits in one sort of connected graph. And so when you're looking at reports or you're looking at dashboards or you're looking at a visualization or a scorecard, you're getting a view of that data, right? And if you caught, Anoop made a comment when he was doing his presentation about, hey, I can get rid of project managers at some point in time Because if you have all this data interconnected and you're using it as the source of truth, then you can see the impact of projects on initiatives and applications and capabilities. So any view that you can see, you can show to anyone else in your organization, provided that it makes sense for them. And that's the real power and the speed of the tool. Instead of having these static documents that get stale or out of date, you're giving a view of a data set that's real time and accurate and covers a huge scope of your organization's ecosystem.
I just want to say that is the same thing as a business architecture knowledge base, which was the premise of this whole thing. Right. Yes. But yeah, it's out of the box. That's one of the biggest used integrations. But I will tell you that I was just going to give you a watch out on it, because sometimes the level of detail and granularity in ServiceNow isn't at the level that you want it for your architecture tool. So I just say yes, but make sure, because I have a customer that had it flowing from ServiceNow into LeanIX, and he realized there was everything from SAP ERP all the way down to some little tiny something or other. Right. So what he started doing was he actually flipped it, and he said, you know what, the applications are going to be owned by LeanIX, and I'm going to push them to ServiceNow. So you can do it. You just have to look at the data and see, is it at the right level, and all that. But technically, you can bring it in, no problem. I think this lady over here had a question.
Talk about how using management is try to advise you to be, there's very thin lines there that you cross. And like there are very thin lines, and once they're going to push back, that's where the limitation.
Well, and also I personally have come up with this phrasing, which is you put in your architecture tool what is architecturally significant. And I look at it as like icebergs, right? So the tip of the iceberg from the project management system, from the, these other systems that have information, those go to LeanIX, and the detail live in that other tool. But they're not intended to do different things. But if you say, is this architecturally significant? Yes, then it goes in LeanIX. No, it stays over there. Like the process cards that come from Signavio, but the details in Signavio. But you can connect to it because I've got the card. I've got the top level, what's above the water on the iceberg. And that's how I see it. This. Oh, okay. And that is probably the number one question we get is, well, wait, I already have a project management tool. I already have this tool or that tool. Why do I need this? And when you bring it all together, that's when you start to get that transparency. It's really the connectivity that matters. When I was doing my own tool that I built from scratch, it was just simple SharePoint and Visio, and it was all this, scripts. And I mean, I had a whole lot of stuff going on. But when I tried to go from this to that, to that, to that, I couldn't do it, because everything was this to that, and then this to that. But I couldn't ever get that full level of transparency, at least the way I built it before I had the tool.
Use that flag for that purpose. The reason Jason is here, so I will tell you where the problem lies in there. What happened is when we started saying, hey, let's make LeanIX our APM tool and use ServiceNow as LeanIX as a source of truth and ServiceNow as a LeanIX charges by application. And I have hundreds of retired applications. I still need to maintain it, right? So yes, every application in there. So every desktop application I don't use, other than I have to file a state tax, right? And state uses a stupid old desktop application. You have to use it, right? So every one of them is app now. So what the actual, if to make it successful APM as a tool is not to charge for the retired app, right? It's the app which are in your life cycle, because if you are using a say, I'll give you an example. When I'm doing app rationalization, I like to see the retired apps because then I can plan it and say, show the value. Yeah, cost reduction. I can't do cost reduction because now I have to have another 300 apps on there to show that value in there. So a feedback in there that's one challenge. So that's what we used was we created a simple flag in the app service now, sent to LeanIX. When you sync it, it looks at that flag and then, yeah.
I implemented LeanIX for the first time. It was a total number of actions. I mean, you can easily go. I remember the first time we implemented 1,000 actions.
Right. And it's a conversation with the sales team as well. Yeah, because there's certainly room for discussion. Right. What other questions? Yeah, those are good questions. What other questions do you guys have? Is anybody interested in a book? I have 4 of them. Yeah. Anybody? Okay, so write your name on a piece of paper and hand it to me. One, raise your hand if you're interested. 1, 2, 3. Well, okay. Well, then everybody's a winner. Here, yay! Right. Yeah, and if you guys are interested, I'll put a link to that masterclass. Got over here. Yeah. So the Wendy Kuhn, that masterclass is a great thing. Have you guys seen that or know about it? You guys know about that? Yeah, it's really good. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.